Welcome to the Sports Scouting Report podcast with Lee Brecheen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sports Scouting Report show. I'm your host, Lee Brecheen. I'm going to be doing the show solo today, but we've got some great topics. Today's topics are going to be talking about the NFL Hall of Fame and bring back some memories to some of our listeners. Some of the guys that were inducted were from the 70s and 80s and 90s, you know, my time of growing up. And then a lot of the guys that came in the early 2000s, late 90s. And Megatron, you know, is not long ago, early 2000s. We're also going to talk about the top 3 offensive lines in Louisiana for college football. We'll be talking about LSU, ULL, and Tulane, and why I think these are the top 3 offensive lines in the state from all 12 colleges in Louisiana. We'll also talk about some other stuff as we go here. And I'm going to mention, I want to mention right now, acknowledging the passing of one of the greatest coaches of all time, in Bobby Bowden, who died at the age of 91. One of my favorite coaches growing up. I thought Bobby Bowden was the best coach in the United States for several years. And I remember when he was a young coach and he took his team to Tiger Stadium in 1979, I believe. One of the games that really turned around his program by beating LSU. That's the year LSU had David Woodley, the late David Woodley at LSU at quarterback, the Bird graduate, and also Steve Ensminger from Central High School. I remember being at that game. And I remember Terry Bowden telling me, and some of the other people that know, you know, obviously his son, who I work with at ULM of Monroe, that if they would have lost LSU in 79, he might have become the next LSU coach to succeed Charlie McClendon. But I remember going to a Florida State game with LSU in Tallahassee. And I remember, I'm trying to remember if it was Curly Hallman or DiNardo, but it was really embarrassing. LSU got beat really bad. Did not have a good time in Tallahassee. It was my one and only time in Tallahassee to go to a game. I was in my early 20s, and that was a heck of an experience. That was pre-Charlie Ward and all those guys. I think Danny Cannell was the quarterback, and they were really on a roll. Florida State was really doing well. Deion Sanders might have even played on the team. That's how long ago it was. But you know, Charlie Ward, their Heisman Trophy winner. Bobby Bowden won 2 national championships. He won 377 games. Unbelievable. 377 wins. Was 34 years as head coach at Florida State. 34 years. You're not going to see that again. Saban's not even going to be at Alabama for 34 years or 30 years. That's amazing. He was colorful. I thought his Southern charm was incredible. I used to love hearing Bobby Bowden post-game at all his games. I used to always wanted to just hear him talk. He was incredible. He's going to be really missed, and wanted to acknowledge that today. One of my favorite coaches growing up as a kid, Bobby Bowden, Florida State. We're going to miss him, and I know that college football lost one of the great ones and a great person. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to get into the show. I want to mention our sponsors before we talk about the Hall of Fame and some of the inductees. And I think people are really going to love us talking about LSU, Tulane, and ULL, the top offensive lines in the state, and why. And who's 1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to say that yet, but who's 1, 2, and 3 out of that group. But I want to thank our sponsors, Treads and Care Tire Company. They have a beautiful location, new location. In Central, off of Hooper Road and Park Place Drive. Be sure to call them at 331-8144. That's Treads and Care Tire Company. They have tires, they do brakes, they do oil changes, alignments, air conditioning, tire light. They do pickup and delivery. That's Treads and Care Tire Company on Hooper Road, Park Place Drive since 1971. Devin Hawley has been in business. A great guy. I've been doing business with him for many, many years. I want to also thank John Harvey Toyota. Harvey Autos, if they have 3 dealerships there, 3 Harvey Toyota, Harvey Subaru, and Lexus of Shreveport, Bossier City. Low prices, honest people. They really are. If you need a used car, new car, you've got to get in touch with John Harvey Toyota, Harvey Subaru, and Lexus of Shreveport. Tell them Lee sent you. Great people. And we also want to thank a sponsor of ours, a new sponsor that just joined up with us about 2 months ago, Medine's Collision Center. They're located on Kincaid Avenue in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Great people, man. Family owned since the 60s. They do great work. If you need a paint job or body work to your vehicle, car, or truck, they're your Baton Rouge accident advisors. Go see Chris Medine, Dominica Medine at the Baton Rouge Auto Shop experts here. And their number to call is 357-7983. That's 357-7983. Medine's Collision Center in Baton Rouge, one of the places you got to bring your truck or car into if you need body work or a paint job or anything like that. I want to go ahead and start the show. We're going to talk about the top offensive lines in the state. You got 12 colleges in Louisiana. If you include Louisiana College, they're NAIA now, by the way. They're not D3 anymore. But to me, today's going to be about the offensive line. Who has the best offensive line in Louisiana? This is going to shock some people. Doesn't shock me because I watch a lot of football. But the number one offensive line in the state of Louisiana, in my opinion, this is based on pro prospects. This is based on who's coming back, based on how good they can be as a unit, not just in Louisiana, but nationally. And proven players. Proven meaning they helped their team to over 230 yards rushing a game last year. The Raging Cajuns are number one. That's right. ULL has the best offensive line in Louisiana right now over LSU. And here's why. They've got the best offensive lineman in the state coming back, and Osiris Torrance, who's from St. Helena Central High School in Tangipahoa Parish. Osiris is 6'5", 332 pounds. He's a redshirt sophomore. He'll be a future first-round pick or second-round pick, if not this coming draft. If he wants to come back another year, it just depends on when he decides to leave ULL. Osiris Torrance is an incredible freak athlete who proved it last year and helped his team beat Iowa State on the road and actually had a phenomenal season last year in the Sun Belt. They also have Max Mitchell, who's 6'6", 300, runs a 4.9 40, will also be a first or second round pick in the NFL draft. He's a junior, so he could come back one more year or go pro this year. Those are two phenomenal offensive linemen. They also have a center who's one of the best centers in the country, who's from Como High School and around the Lafayette area, Shane Valot. 6 foot, 270 pounds, started every game last year for the Cajuns. He also has a pro future. You see where I'm going here? I mean, these are some phenomenal players. And if you haven't seen ULL play, watch the offensive line. Watch it this year. Shane Valot's a redshirt junior. Again, he could go pro or come back for another year after this one. He's a phenomenal center. I loved him in high school. Max Mitchell's from Neville High School. Osiris Torrance is from St. Helena Central. And you know what the rhyme is here? They're all from Louisiana. People say there's no good O-lineman in Louisiana. That's a bunch of baloney. They also have Ken Marks coming back, who's from Beaumont, Texas. 6'4", 308 pounds. He's a senior. He also has a pro future. Then there's Carlos Rubio from Alexandria High School. He's been around a long time. This is his redshirt junior year. 6'4", 300 pounds. Also will get a shot in the NFL. And they also picked up a starter from ULM of Monroe, before Coach Bowden was hired. TJ Furaloa, who's 6'4", 302 pounds, started the last 2 years at ULM. He's also an NFL prospect. And then you have backup center Landon Burton, who's a future NFL player. He is a NFL future player. Redshirt freshman from St. Thomas More High School, Landon Burton, 6'2", 285 with 5 flat in the 40. I hope people understand that this talent is really the reason UL was so good in 220 is because of their O-line. They had a pretty good defense too. But the O-line is why Levi Lewis and all these running backs like Mitchell and all these guys they had last year basically ran on people at will. But they have the number one offensive line to me in the state of Louisiana. Not only is it the best offensive line in the state of Louisiana, it's the best offensive line in their conference in the Sun Belt, and I think it's one of the top 5 offensive lines in the country. We're going to go take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about who has the second best offensive line in the country. You would guess that if you were guessing. It's the LSU Tigers. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Listen, whatever you're driving right now, Tommy Harvey wants it. Bring it in to Harvey Subaru, Lexus of Shreveport, Bossier City, or John Harvey Toyota. They're paying big bucks for all trades right now. They'll cut you a check right there. Tell them Lee sent you.
Welcome back. You listen to the Sports Scouting Report. I'm Lee Brecheen, your host. We're talking about the top offensive lines in the state of Louisiana. ULL is number 1. Look, I want to mention this before we go to LSU. ULL has 8 more players that I didn't mention that have NFL futures, and 5 of them are from Louisiana. I want to mention them. Nathan Thomas from Chalmette, 6'5", 300 pounds. Luke Janovich is 6'4", 265. Logan Newell from Neville, 6'5", 280. A.J. Gilley from Natchitoches Central, 6'3", 300. Jax Harrington from Erath, 6'4", 313. Brody Reich from Zachary High School, 6'4", 320. Michael Newber, who they just signed from Slidell High School, 6'3", 285, is going to be a great player for them. They got a redshirt freshman named Tyler Brown from Mississippi in Jackson, 6'3", 300. Caleb Harris, a signee from Sulphur, 6'5", 310. George Jackson, 6'4", 325, a big-time player from Stone Mountain Stevenson in Georgia. I really like this offensive line a lot. But we're going to talk about LSU in this segment. LSU's got the second best offensive line in the state, which a lot of people are going to be angry by this that are LSU fans, but they don't really understand the ULL O-line. It's incredible. I mean, they've got 7 guys on the offensive line that are going to be in the NFL. That's more than LSU, okay? Now, LSU has some guys that are not proven that might equal that, but they're not proven. All these guys I mentioned for ULL are proven guys. So let's talk about LSU. It's an experienced offensive line, not necessarily the most talented offensive line in the country. It's led by Ed Ingram, senior from DeSoto, Texas, who decided to come back instead of get drafted in the 4th or 5th round. I thought it was a great decision by Ed Ingram. Ed's got a chance to be a first-round pick. 6'3", 315. Man, he is concrete when he blocks. More suited to be a guard in the pros. They also have Austin Dackless, who's decided to come back as a fifth-year guy, 6'6", 331, out of Texas. Really a native of Louisiana. Has a lot of family in Mamou and Eunice. The offensive line for LSU, you got Chasen Hines, who's been injured a lot of his career. Not a proven guy yet. He's a senior as a guard, 6'3", 340. Liam Shanahan, who transferred in from Harvard. I think he's going to be a really good center this year after 1 year in the league, 6'5", 305 pounds. He'll have a shot at the NFL. You've got some other guys like that are competing. So everything else to me is kind of up in there. You've got, Chasen Hines and Shanahan and Ingram and Dackless. Those guys are probably all going to start. But then you got Cameron Wire, who's now going to start because Dare Rosenthal left to go to Kentucky. It's another reason LSU doesn't have the best offensive line in their own state. But Cameron Wires from East Ascension High School, a junior, 6'6", 311 pounds. This is his year to step up. If he struggles for some reason, you got Garrett Dellinger, a freshman from Michigan, 6'4", 307 pounds. You also have Marlon Martinez, who had a couple of plays last year out of Fort Lauderdale, St. Thomas Aquinas High School. He can play center or guard or tackle. You got Anthony Bradford that needs to step up this year as a guard. Could be all world, but he has yet to start a game. 6'5", 350 pounds. Probably needs to be more around 330. You got Marcus Dumerville, who's a redshirt freshman from Fort Lauderdale, St. Thomas Aquinas, like Marlon Martinez. He's a tackle, could play guard. He needs to step up this year. You got Xavier Hill from Olive Branch, Mississippi, a redshirt freshman who has a chance to be a really good guard for LSU. He's yet to play. He was a signee in 220. You got Charles Turner, who's a veteran who could play center or guard, 6'5", 290, redshirt sophomore. And this is the year Cordell Thomas needs to step up from Southern Lab. He had some injuries. He wasn't in the greatest shape. This is his year to come in there and become really a factor for LSU. They need 7, 8, 9 of these guys to really pan out total. You can't go through the SEC season with 5 guys. You're going to have a couple of injuries. You're going to have a couple, 2 or 3 guys hurt every week. You need almost 10. You know, Cordell's going to be a redshirt sophomore. When I saw Cordell Thomas in high school at Southern Lab, I thought he was incredible. This is prior to him getting hurt. He was in great shape. He was more around that 315 range, about 6'3". He needs to get back to that. He is in better shape than he was the year before. We'll see what happens there, but I think you've got some other guys that need to step up, like Thomas Perry from Turlings Catholic. He missed last year with an injury. Big Thomas needs to step up. He's going to be a sophomore, 6'6", 330. Could play guard or tackle. Another kid to keep an eye on that might play this year, depending on how some of these older guys do, is a freshman signee from Niceville, Florida, Macano, who's 6'4", 293 pounds. He could be a center, guard, or tackle. And a guy that walked on, actually, I'm proud. We did his highlight tape, and we sent it all around the country, but LSU accepted him as a preferred walk-on, or walk-on, whatever you want to call it. But there's a kid named Josh Bilido, who's a true freshman from St. Thomas More High School in Lafayette. 6'2", 310, 312. Got great feet. Very strong. He's got a chance to be a player one day for LSU as a walk-on. He was offered by several prep schools that we sent the tape to his senior year this past year. He's a true freshman. But remember that name, Josh Bilido. He's a walk-on freshman from St. Thomas More High School in Lafayette. Has a lot of ability. He really does. Has great feet. And I think he's a gift for LSU. I think the kid's going to be a great player for them down the road. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tulane and their offensive line and talk about why they're the number 3 offensive line in the state. And we're also going to talk about the Hall of Fame and the inductees. Bring back memories from a lot of our listeners and myself. A lot of these guys that were inducted were guys I grew up watching in the NFL in the 70s and 80s. We'll be right back. If you need a paint job or repairs to your vehicle, go see Madine's Collision Center located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana on Kincaid Avenue. The number to call is 357-7983. That's 357-7983. Your Baton Rouge Accident Advisors. Welcome back. You're listening to the Sports Scouting Report. I'm your host, Lee Brecheen. Our topic today still is the top offensive lines in the state of Louisiana. And coming in at number 3 is Tulane. And this is why Tulane's got the 3rd best offensive line in the state. They have just about everybody back, first of all. And they've got a lot of guys on their offensive line I think that could play in the NFL one day, whether it's free agents or guys drafted in the middle rounds. But I really love their offensive line. I think that's why Tulane has a chance to be a sleeper team this year. A lot of people aren't picking Tulane to do good this year. I am. I think they can do really well because they've got a good offensive line coming back. And it all starts with Corey Dublin. who's going to be a senior this year from Jesuit High School in New Orleans. Corey came on our TV show about 5 years ago, and he wasn't being recruited, and I hope that helped him. I know that Coach Fritz watched our TV show a pretty good bit. But Corey Dublin is a leader. This will be his third year as a starter. He's 6'4", 300 pounds. Tough guy that you just want in the trenches with you when you need somebody. I mean, he's a leader. I think he'll play in the NFL. I really do. He's got all the intangibles. He's a tough guy. He's a guard for the next level. And then you've got guys like Joey Claybrook, who's a junior, 6'7", 300 pounds. Joey's going to play in the NFL one day. You got a freshman that played this past year named Trey Tuggle. Man, what a find out of Mississippi. 6'6", 300 pounds. Really good-looking player. I think he'll play in the NFL one day. And then you've got Josh Remedich from Holy Cross, who played last year as a freshman. He's 6'3", 290. He's got a lot of ability. And then you got your center coming back at Tulane, Sincere Hainsworth, who's 6'1", 305. And I think he'll get drafted or play in the NFL as well. So a lot of these guys will play in the NFL. And then you've got some young guys like Cameron Jackal from Archbishop Shaw, who rotates in. He's 6'6", 300, a junior. You got a guy by the name of Caleb Thomas from California that played last year. He's a freshman, redshirt, 6'3", 300. You got a guy named Timothy Schaefer from Massachusetts who's 6'4", 290 coming in that'll play. And remember Rashad Green from University High? Rashad Green played last year, got some minutes. Still will be a freshman, 6'4", 310 pounds, Rashad Green. And then you got Colby Orgeron, if you remember that name, from John Curtis. He was a defensive tackle in high school. He's 6'5", now 290. You got Matt Lombardi, who's a freshman coming in from Pennsylvania via Pittsburgh, 6'6", 290. And then Caleb Thomas, I mentioned earlier. I mean, there's a good group of guys here that forms, to me, the third best offensive line in the state. And the reason I'm not doing more than 3 colleges is because everybody else is basically the same. If you took Southern University, Nicholls State, McNeese, Southeastern, Northwestern State, they're all very much similar on the O-line. Everybody's got about 1 or 2 really good players. Even Grambling, even Louisiana College, even Louisiana Tech. None of those schools have 4 or 5 guys that I would say are pro prospects or guys that are all conference. And I think that's where Tech needs to improve. And that's what's going to hurt them this year, I think, the Tech team in Ruston. They're not as strong in the O-line as they've been in the past, and at quarterback. I hope you enjoyed the segment on the offensive lines for Louisiana. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about the Hall of Fame and some of the guys that got inducted and just bring back some memories, to the listeners and myself, some guys that played, and talk about them. More than just their name, right, and the team. Just talk about some of the past and some of these guys and what they meant to all of us growing up as kids. We'll be right back. Be sure to take your car and truck for all your tire needs to Treads and Care Tire Company located in Central. The number to call is 331-8144. Family owned and operated since 1971. That's Treads and Care Tire Company. Welcome back. You're listening to the Sports Scouting Report. This segment, we're going to talk about the NFL Hall of Fame inductees. And I'm not going to talk about every one of them. I'm just going to talk about the guys that I watched growing up. And I think a lot of our listeners had teams and players that you liked and followed. First of all, Alan Faneca, congratulations. I remember when Alan Faneca was in high school at Lamar Consolidated in Houston, Texas. He was Touchdown Club Player of the Year. Very rare for an offensive lineman. He signs with LSU. He's actually a teammate of Kevin Mawai, who also went in the Hall of Fame the year before, which to me is phenomenal. 2 guys playing together, both in the Hall of Fame from LSU. Played on the same offensive line. Faneca was a phenomenal player. And I think he's well deserving, obviously, of being in the Hall of Fame. I thought his speech was phenomenal. He sounded like a teacher. And he's a coach right now, currently in Virginia. He didn't mention that in his speech, but he's a football coach in Virginia right now. You know, he went to John Curtis in his early years in high school. His mom and dad are from New Orleans. And then he went with his mom to Texas. His dad moved back here. I got to know his dad. His dad moved back here when he was in college at LSU. Really happy for Peyton Manning, another Louisiana native, went to Newman High School, obviously Archie's son. One of the greatest ever, went to Newman. I remember seeing him play as a freshman at Newman High School. I remember when he was about 6'5", about 180 pounds. And he was a kid filling out, but you knew he would be a great player. He ended up being way greater than I ever would imagine. He was phenomenal in high school, his senior and junior years, and in college, obviously, at Tennessee, he was off the charts. And in the NFL, he was the guy, man. This guy knew the game more than the coaches. He was a coach on the field. Peyton Manning is a stand-up guy. His speech was phenomenal. I really loved from the heart how he talked about how much he loved football and how he wants the game to continue to be good and to be strong. And I believe that. I think it's important that these guys promote the game and talk about saving the game, because there's been a lot of stuff happen over the last 2 years, and we want to make sure football stays strong. And I really a lot of respect for Peyton Manning mentioning that in his induction last night. He's a great class act, man. He loves the game. He loves the game like I do. I really love football. And I was never a Hall of Famer, or I didn't play college football, but to hear him say that, man, I just have even more respect for him as a person and not just a player. Some of the guys that played over the years when I was a kid were inducted in the last 2 days, but Harold Carmichael went to Southern University. And I used to watch Harold Carmichael with the Eagles, and he was 6'8" in height. And I always told my dad, I was like, man, that is the tallest dude I've ever seen play football in my life. And I was a kid, right? And I remember Harold Carmichael was just, you couldn't guard the guy. How do you guard 6'8"? And back then in the 70s, corners were about 5'9", 10, and they were really thin. They weren't big guys like they are today. So Harold was kind of the Megatron before Megatron, right? Calvin Johnson went in the Hall of Fame too. And I remember seeing one of my childhood idols, Donnie Shell, went in from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I was a big Steelers fan growing up. I was a big Steel Curtain fan, Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, Mel Blount from Southern University. And Donnie Shell got in. I'm really happy that he waited as long as he did, man. He was one of the best strong safeties ever. You know, he was before the Honey Badger. He knew where to line up. He knew where to go. Troy Polamalu, who was also inducted, was another guy that was before the Honey Badger. I mean, these were guys that were like that in the 70s and 80s. Their instincts were off the chart. Donnie Shell was the reason the Steelers won 4 Super Bowls. He was the glue of that defense in the back end. He was incredible. He had big games against the Dallas Cowboys. I remember him picking off Danny White from the Dallas Cowboys in key games and Roger Staubach from the Dallas Cowboys. He was such a clutch guy. You look at Cliff Harris, speaking of Dallas Cowboys, man, that guy was so tough. I remember he had some of his best games against the Steelers. But Cliff Harris would knock you silly. He went to Ouachita Baptist. I'm so happy that he was able to promote his school. They got a lot of attention out of that, a lot of exposure. But that was one of the toughest safeties ever. That, you know, when I was growing up, I was like, man, I used to tell my dad, I was like, that guy is one of the toughest guys in the game. And I was not a Cowboys fan. Then you had Steve Atwater and John Lynch, 2 of the other best hitters of all time, inducted in the Hall of Fame. Atwater was just, man, he was huge, 6'3", 220, playing safety. That's back in the 80s. That's back when it was not, you know, guys weren't that big. And then John Lynch was one of the toughest, smartest guys to ever play the game. Went to Stanford College. I didn't know he was a baseball player. I didn't know he was drafted in the second round. I didn't know that. And then two of the inductees that I was really happy for is Drew Pearson from the Dallas Cowboys, another guy that had big games against my Steelers. But Drew Pearson was clutch. He really helped Staubach and Dallas, and Tom Landry won a lot of games, number 88, before Michael Irvin. And I was really the most happy for Tom Flores, the former Oakland Raiders coach, won 2 Super Bowls. At 84 years of age, gets inducted, and I loved his speech. He said, they let me go second because I got to get to sleep. I got to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm an old guy. But Tom Flores was one of my favorite coaches, too. I mean, I thought what he did with Oakland was incredible. And he won another Super Bowl when they were called the Los Angeles Raiders. But I'll never forget them beating the Redskins with Marcus Allen and that long run they keep showing over and over. And Jim Plunkett needs to be in the Hall of Fame, by the way. 2 Super Bowl wins as a quarterback. The number 1 pick of the 1970 draft. He was started with New England Patriots. But Jim Plunkett should be in the Hall of Fame. I thought he was until they announced it the other day. But Tom Flores had an eye for talent. He really did. I thought Matt Millen, drafting him, and a lot of the great players they had on those teams, Lester Hayes, post John Madden with Oakland. I mean, Flores didn't get the recognition he deserved till last night. Class act. He's been play-by-play for the Oakland Raiders for several years. I don't know if he's still doing it now, but he was doing it up until about 2018, 2019. He was doing play-by-play for the Oakland Raiders. I hope you enjoyed the show today. Really love to come up with different ideas for the fans and people that listen or people who love college football in Louisiana. It doesn't always have to be recruiting. Want to thank our sponsors again, Treads and Care. What a great company. Medine's Collision Center. And Harvey Toyota. Really appreciate you guys being a part of what we do. And again, condolences to the Bowden family. I work with Terry Bowden with ULM of Monroe, and my condolences to the family. I worked with Tommy Bowden when he was at Tulane, and Tommy was at Clemson, and then his whole family basically coached football. But one of my favorite all-time coaches, Bobby Bowden. We're going to miss him. What a great guy. Had the best charm of any coach ever. And came to Louisiana and got work done and got a lot of great players out of Louisiana when LSU wasn't very good, and they were incredible. Want to remind everybody to go to our website to pre-order your North and South copy now. It'll be out in a couple of weeks. Our 2021 football preview magazine with all 312 high schools in it, all recruiting, and also the 12 colleges, LSU, Southern, Tech, ULM, McNeese, all the colleges are previewed. That's Louisiana Football Magazine Football Preview. Will be out in 2 weeks. Go on lafootballmagazine.com and pre-order your North or South copy. And also you can get digital copies, North and South as well. Go to lafootballmagazine.com. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Scouting Report podcast with Lee Brecheen.